Hi, this is Jeff from the North Versailles Library. Some light verse. George lived in a very small town. He was the deputy sheriff, a good and gentle man. He was loved, and the people called him George. When the town sheriff retired, George was elated. He knew he would be promoted, and after all these years, George, would be sheriff. The sheriff, by God. George took his oath of office, standing proudly before the town. In fancy words, he promised to serve and protect. The people cheered, and he was loved. But the people called him George, and he was upset. It's sheriff, he thought, not just George. That day, George sent away for the finest sheriff's uniform in the territory. When it came, he put it on and looked and felt glorious. But the people still called him George, and he was furious. It's sheriff, blasted! Sheriff! 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 That very day, George went into the big city and got himself a new badge. A very big badge. In fact, the new badge was so big that George was barely visible behind it. And finally, the people called him sheriff. The people didn't see much of the sheriff after that. The new badge was heavy and clumsy and made it difficult for George to move, let alone serve and protect. One Friday, George got a request from the state police to help capture an escaped prisoner. After searching for about an hour, George spotted the prisoner. The man was armed. He turned and shot at George, but the bullets bounced off the badge. George laughed. He knew he was safe from anything out there. I'm the sheriff, by George. He drew his pistol and fired at the prisoner. But the bullet ricocheted back off the inside of the big badge and killed him. And the people buried George. More than anything, Catherine wanted to be a writer. She knew she had much to say. She could feel it boiling up inside. But when it came to committing herself to paper, Catherine couldn't. She was frightened to look that closely at herself. If only I could write without the pain, she thought. I've got it. Catherine began to write furiously, with her eyes closed. This is my space, damn it! Get out! Beat it! Scram! Mona had a right to be angry. After all, she had plainly marked it with a heavy chalk circle. It was obviously her space. Mona had fixed it so that everything she wanted was inside the circle, and Conrad was certainly not wanted. But Conrad kept invading Mona's space to say that he loved her. Mona had a wall built up from the chalk line. No windows, no doors, just wall. And tall enough that Conrad couldn't climb it. Conrad chose himself a space just next to Mona's and began throwing things over her wall. Bunches of violets and daffodils, chocolate-covered cherries, and dozens of notes that said, I love you. Mona threw back the violets and daffodils and most of the chocolate-covered cherries. This is my space, you boob, Mona yelled. Take that. And she threw the notes that said, I love you, over into Conrad's space. And they've been in love at each other ever since. Sam and Mary were in love, all right. Bell ringing, skyrockets, butterflies in the stomach, love. They wanted to get married, but their families were outraged and violently opposed. After all, Sam was red, Mary was orange, and the children, oh God forbid, the children would be yellow. About the age of 23, Jason realized that people die. After the panic, Jason decided that he would prepare to die when the time came. Jason sold a few belongings he had and used the money to buy a plot of land on which to get ready. Jason chose the site and dug a grave. He lived, as it were, in the trench and waited. Even though Jason had a color TV, he grew restless, thinking he might not be quite ready enough. So Jason built a casket with an air pipe and incorporated the best features of a dump truck and flush toilet into a very elaborate system to bury himself, which he promptly did. That was years ago. Muffled sounds come up from the air pipe now and then, but no one, save Jason, really knows if Jason's time has come or if he is still just getting ready. It started out as a friendly game of catch. Jack and Carol were quite good at it too. They began by tossing the weather back and forth. Hot, humid, and religion, politics, and sex. God, alive and well and living in Argentina. President, who? Yes, no. Then the ball scores and the local gossip. 5-2, 23-0, MK plus ER, JR plus ET plus TT. Having covered the usual topics, Carol and Jack began to speak of far more personal things. They tossed their fears, hopes, and dreams back and forth. They talked about loving and even dying. Suddenly they stopped. It wasn't just a game anymore. Jack and Carol realized how close they had become. After a long silence, they began the game again. Skillfully, they used what each other had shared to move one another away. Hurt, 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 hurt. Soon they were far enough apart that the hurts couldn't touch them. Jack and Carol were comfortable again. Mary Alice had potential. It was the first thing anyone noticed when they met her. Mary Alice, they would say, you've got great potential. After a while, Mary Alice became frightened. What if I should lose my potential? So, Mary Alice kept her potential stuffed under her mattress. She soon discovered that the lump under the mattress made it difficult to sleep. Mary Alice packed her potential and took it to the bank on the far side of town. She rented a large safety deposit box and locked her potential away in the vault. Faithfully, on the third Tuesday of every month, Mary Alice would visit her potential. Cautiously, she would peek into the box. Then she locked it up again and stored her potential safely back in the vault. Feeling quite content, Mary Alice would take the bus home, secure in the knowledge that if nothing else, she would always have potential. The wedding was magnificent. There were pastel tents, champagne fountains, caviar, orchids floating in a pool, and rose petals on the grass. The bride and groom were radiant, the perfect all-American couple. The wedding night was equal to their splendor. They had the wedding suite, more champagne, satin sheets, and the fullest of moons to make love by. But she had a headache, a severe one by the look of her, and so it went until the honeymoon was almost ended. She with headaches, he with toothaches, he with backaches, she with cramps. One evening before bed, he and she were sipping warm milk when quite suddenly she burst into tears and ran to her dressing room. He followed and watched as she, still crying, began to undress. She removed the double lashes and the flowing blonde wig. She creamed her face clean of shaped brows and flawless complexion. She had freckles. She slipped both hands under the lace negligee and removed the bosom which had filled it to overflowing. Then she slipped off her padded girdle, which was needed for balance, of course. Standing there, creamed, plain, in unfilled lace, she looked at him and waited. A tender smile began to break, and suddenly he was laughing. Loud, joyful, side-splitting laughter. He washed off his manly tan, removed his hairpiece and shoulder pads from his silk pajamas. He slipped out of the waist slim shorts and kicked off his elevator slippers. He and she held one another close, real and touchable. They had made love. Thanks for listening. Stay safe.